Please come. You helped my dad once. I don't have anyone else. 12 words. No name, no phone number, just a folded square of paper on the floor of a Hells Angels clubhouse at 3 in the morning. A 13-year-old girl had written it in the dark, walked a mile through a 31-degree Indiana night to deliver it, and gone back before anyone noticed she was gone. She had tried the right people 4 times. 4 times, the door closed. So she tried the wrong ones. 211 of them showed up Friday night. And what they found in that warehouse, nobody saw coming. If those words hit you the way they hit me, subscribe, because this story is only just beginning. Drop your city in the comments and stay with me. Now back to that night. You helped my dad once. I don't have anyone else. Those 10 words were the last 9 on the note. Thomas Gage Hartwell read them standing in the doorway of the chapter clubhouse at 4417 Route 9 East, one hand still on the doorframe, the other holding a folded square of paper he'd picked up off the floor 10 seconds ago, thinking it was a receipt someone had dropped. It was not a receipt. He read the note 3 times. Not because he hadn't understood it the first time, because some things require you to stand still for a moment before you're allowed to move. Outside, the parking lot was empty. The single security light cast everything in orange and gray. Across the road, last year's corn stubble stood in frozen rows, looking like wire in the dark. The temperature had not moved from 31 degrees since midnight. The thin skin of ice on the asphalt had been walked across recently. You could see where it had cracked and then resettled, the way ice does when it's right at the edge of freezing and a light weight passes over it. Someone had been here in the last hour. Someone small, judging by the size of the print and the weight of it. Gage set the note on the workbench and looked at it under the shop light. 34 words. Blue ballpoint pen. The header of the worksheet it was written on had been cut away with scissors. Whoever wrote this had thought about that, removed any detail that could be traced back to them before they were ready to be found. That wasn't panic. That was planning. They are moving the kids Friday night. Warehouse on Road 7, past the grain elevator. Please come. Please. You helped my dad once. I don't have anyone else. He noticed the word please used twice in a row. Not repetition. Not carelessness. The first please was a request. The second was what came after the first one hadn't felt like enough. He noticed, you helped my dad once. Past tense. Specific. The father was not available to ask directly. He noticed it was Thursday morning, which meant Friday night was less than 43 hours away. He picked up his phone. The call went to Bishop, Raymond Taft, chapter president, 65 years old, founding member. The man who had been riding Indiana roads since before Gage had his first driver's license. Bishop did not raise his voice. He had never needed to. Bishop, it's Gage. One beat. I need you at the shop, now. I've got something in my hand, and I need you to read it before I do anything else. A pause on the other end. Not hesitation. Assessment. On my way. The line went dead. That was it. Bishop arrived at 4:03 a.m. He read the note at the workbench under the shop light. He read it once, set it down, read it again. Then he looked at Gage. Road 7, he said quietly. You know who owns that warehouse? Not yet, Gage said. LLC registered through the county, Bishop said. Bought roughly 19 months ago. He paused. We never had reason to look at it twice. What neither of them knew yet, what wouldn't come until Ledger pulled the county property records 4 hours later, was that the LLC was registered to the same name as the Valley Road Group home. That the warehouse had been purchased 11 months after the first child disappeared from Boyd's facility under paperwork labeled transferred to alternative placement. And that a locked filing cabinet in Boyd's office contained a private ledger with 7 entries, each one a set of initials, a dollar amount, and a single word in the final column. Placed. But that was later. This was 4 a.m. on a Thursday. And this was a child who had walked 1.5 miles in the dark, on the chance that people who looked like trouble might turn out to be the only ones who stopped. Gage had heard that logic before. Not in those words, but in a version of them. 21 years ago, his daughter Emma had been 7 years old and 14 months deep into the foster system while a custody case moved at the speed of county paperwork. He remembered what those 14 months cost. He remembered a beige waiting room and a caseworker who never returned calls, and the particular face Emma made when the supervised visit ended and the door closed between them. Emma was 28 now. She was fine. She had been fine for a long time. Gage had never stopped counting those 14 months. He counted now. 9 months in that farmhouse. A broken finger, never set. A jaw bruise someone made with their hand, and a child who had tried to tell the system what was happening to her, and had been told, in 4 different ways, by 4 different doors, that she wasn't worth the paperwork. He looked at Bishop. I need ledger, stitch, scout, and courier, he said. Here by 6. Bishop was already dialing. Frank Dutton arrived at 5:48 a.m. with a thermos of coffee and the quiet of a man who had spent 19 years as an IRS investigator examining documents that other people believed were permanently hidden. His road name was Ledger. He was 62 years old, broad-shouldered, with reading glasses on a chain around his neck. Not for style, but because in 200-plus fraud examinations, the seconds it took to find misplaced glasses were seconds that could have been spent reading. When Gage described the locked filing cabinet, the private ledger, the column labeled placed, Ledger listened without moving. Then he said, 7 entries is a pattern. A pattern has a paper trail. Walk me through what you know. He set his thermos down and opened his laptop. Paul Acker came through the door at 6:02 a.m. His road name was Stitch. He was 44 years old, a registered nurse who had spent 11 years in an Indianapolis emergency room before the chapter became his life. He had the particular calm of ER nurses, not the absence of feeling, but the management of it, the ability to be fully present in a crisis without the crisis taking ownership of him. When Gage said 81 pounds, 5'1", untreated fracture, 9 months. Stitch wrote it down without comment. His comment came 30 seconds later. Refeeding syndrome is a real risk when a malnourished child receives adequate nutrition too quickly. The first hour after we find her, I need to be the first person who touches her medically. We don't guess at this one. Danny Whitmore was 20 minutes out when he texted. His road name was Scout. He was 31, youngest full-patch member, 6 years of Army intelligence before the chapter. He had already started a sketch on the back of a work order on the shop's clipboard by the time he sat down. The grain elevator. The county road. the farm property to the east. "I know Road 7, he said. "I can be at that warehouse by noon and tell you what we're walking into before sundown." Ed Halberstam arrived last, at 6:18, smelling like fresh air and moving fast. His road name was Courier. He was 49 years old, a former crime reporter for the Indianapolis Star who had left journalism 14 years ago but kept every contact he'd ever built. He had the Indiana State Police public affairs number memorized. More importantly, he knew which division handled trafficking cases, and which investigator in that division answered calls at 5 in the morning when the information was right. "There's someone at ISP District 22 in LaPorte," he said, setting his phone face up on the workbench. "Investigator named Vasquez. She's moved on cases faster than what we've got. I'll have her on the line by 7. 5 brothers. Different histories. 1 table. 1 note between them. 34 words, still on the workbench where Gage had set it 3 hours ago. And outside, 41 hours until Friday night. Now. Here's what you might be thinking right now. You might be thinking, 200 men on motorcycles, a converted farmhouse, a locked warehouse, and you're already writing the ending in your head. Engines roaring, chain link fences coming down, someone getting hurt. That is the story the news has trained you to expect. Here's what was actually happening at that workbench at 6:20 in the morning. A former IRS investigator was pulling county property records with the precision of someone who had testified in federal court. A trauma nurse was writing a medical triage protocol on a legal pad. A former intelligence analyst was drawing a surveillance map from memory. A journalist with 2 decades of contacts was preparing a call to a state investigator who would know exactly what to do with what they were about to give her. This was not a war council. It was a rescue operation. And the difference between those 2 things was everything. Scout left for Road 7 at 6:15 a.m. Courier made his first call at 6:30. Ledger had county property records on his screen by 7, and Gage sat down with what he knew about the child who had written the note. He didn't know her name yet. He didn't know about James Crawford, about the cardiac episode on the highway outside Millhaven 3 years before his death, about the 2 chapter members who had pulled over and stayed and followed the ambulance to the hospital and sat in the waiting room until they knew he was stable. He didn't know that James Crawford had told his daughter that story more than once, or that he'd told her, "People who look like trouble are sometimes the only ones who stop." What Gage knew was simpler. A child who had no options left had used the only one she had. Nobody gets to, "I don't have anyone else," without trying everyone else first. 7 months ago, September, warm Indiana still holding its summer, Lily had tried to tell a state inspection worker about the food. Not dramatically, not with accusations. She did it the way she did everything. Carefully, with specific language, standing in the common room while Boyd's staff hovered near the window. She said the kitchen was padlocked between meals. She said meal portions had been reduced as behavioral consequence. The inspector was a young woman in her late 20s with a clipboard and 6 more facilities on her schedule before 5 o'clock. She wrote it down. She noted it. Resident reports concerns about portion sizes. Then she spoke to Boyd, who told her in his patient and measured voice that Lily had arrived with a documented history of exaggerated reporting, that the dietary plan was on file and available for review. The inspector reviewed the dietary plan. It was immaculate. The file was closed the same day. Lily had still believed, at 7 months ago, that if you told an adult, the adult fixed it. She learned something different that afternoon. 5 months ago, she got her hands on a phone during an off-site errand. She called the Indiana Department of Child Services hotline. She had rehearsed what to say. She gave her name, her location, a description of conditions. The call was logged and assigned a case number. Then it was routed to the county DSS supervisor. The county DSS supervisor was Carol Ann Phelps, a woman with 26 years in child welfare and photographs of children she'd helped on her office wall. She was also the person who had fast-tracked Lily's placement to Boyd's facility in the first place, and who had closed 3 previous complaints against that facility without ever visiting it. She marked Lily's call as a duplicate concern from a placement-resistant youth and closed it the same afternoon. 3 months ago, Lily wrote a letter to her mother's hospital. She described what was happening. She put it in the outgoing mail basket on a Tuesday afternoon. A staff member removed it before it left the building. Lily didn't know. She waited 6 weeks for a response that was never going to arrive. 6 weeks of wondering whether her mother didn't believe her, whether her mother had given up, whether the silence was its own kind of answer. The silence did more damage than a refusal would have. And 8 days ago, a Wednesday night, 11 o'clock, Lily had been locked in the East Wing quiet room as punishment for asking why one of the other children hadn't come to breakfast. The door locked from the outside. The heating vent in the room shared a shaft with Boyd's office. She heard things she was never meant to hear. She had no recording device, no phone, nothing but a donated copy of Charlotte's Web with a cracked spine and the pen she kept tucked inside the waistband of her leggings. Close and ready, the way her father had told her journalists kept things. She wrote every word down immediately. Friday works, after 10. I need it dark. I've got 3 that are ready. Road 7, the warehouse, same as last time. You bring your own transport. A pause. The other voice was inaudible through the vent. Don't worry about the state. Carol runs the file reviews. Nothing moves without her. Another pause. The Crawford girl is one of them. She's been trouble. Better she goes first. She tore the page out of the book. She folded it. She put it inside her sweatshirt, flat against her skin, where it had lived for 8 days. Through night checks, through meals, through 2 more locks and a patrol schedule she had memorized over weeks of watching. She wrote the note on Thursday morning at 2 a.m., while the facility was quiet. She checked the hallways. She counted the exits the way she always counted exits. She went out the utility room window. She walked 1.5 miles in the dark. She didn't know if anyone would answer. She went anyway. What Gage didn't know yet, what wouldn't come until Scout called back at 2:47 p.m., was that the Road 7 warehouse wasn't empty. But that comes next. By 9 a.m., Thursday, Bishop was on the phone with the Gary chapter. Bishop, it's Bishop. He didn't explain which Bishop. There was only one voice that called like that, flat and certain as a fence post, as, I need every available brother from your chapter at the Route 9 shop by sundown today. All of them. A pause on the other end. 3 seconds. What's going on? There's a facility on Valley Road that's been moving children. Transfer is Friday night. We're not waiting on County DSS to take their time on this one. Say no more. We're coming. The line went dead. And that was it. No questions about proof or evidence. No debate about whether they had enough information. 89. Gary chapter members putting on their cuts before 10 o'clock in the morning because a brother had called, and the reason was a child. Terre Haute was the same call. 61 riders. Same answer. By noon Thursday, the 3-chapter coordination was confirmed. 211 men, 1 objective, 32 hours. Later, much later, after the operation was over and the state investigator had filed her report, she would note in the official record that the Road 7 warehouse was secured and all children located before law enforcement arrived on scene. She would note that she was not, in her professional assessment, able to criticize this. The clubhouse on Route 9 had smelled like old motor oil and cold coffee at 3:17 in the morning when Gage found the note. By 2 in the afternoon Thursday, it smelled like motorcycle fuel and the focused energy of men who understood exactly what they were there for. The note was still on the workbench. Nobody had moved it. Scout's call came in at 2:47 p.m. His voice was level, the Army intelligence level that communicated urgency through precision rather than volume. "I've been on the property for 4 hours," he said. "Single structure, corrugated metal, roughly 6,000 square feet. 1 vehicle entry point from the county road. 2 personnel at the south entrance. They rotate every 40 minutes. I timed it 3 times. A pause. "There are sounds from the interior, Gage. North wall, intermittent, not equipment." Gage was quiet for a moment. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." He set the phone down on the workbench next to the note, and now, armed with Scout's reconnaissance, Ledger's property records, Courier's contact at ISP District 22, and 211 brothers who had not asked a single question before getting on their bikes, Gage was about to do something that Raymond Boyd's state license and Carol Ann Phelps's locked filing drawer and Gary Weston's monthly cash arrangement had been built for 31 months to prevent. What none of them knew yet was what they would find in the north section of that warehouse. What they didn't know was what Lily Crawford had been doing since 4 a.m. Thursday. Waiting in the dark, counting her breaths the way her father had taught her to count things that mattered. She had knocked on the wall 3 times. Heard nothing. She knocked again at 9 p.m. And then she waited. Friday came in cold and gray, the way March always comes to Indiana, not with drama, but with a stubborn, settled chill that makes you believe spring is something that happened to other people. By 9 p.m., the Route 9 parking lot held motorcycles in every direction. Not chaos, not a crowd. Rows. 211 machines parked in disciplined formation across the asphalt and the overflow gravel, the way men arrange things when they have done this before and understand that precision matters more than display. Indiana chapter in the front rows. Gary chapter along the east fence. Terre Haute, filling the south end in tight columns, chrome catching the security light in fragments. The engines had gone quiet 11 minutes ago. Cut almost in unison, the silence after all that thunder landing like a held breath. 211 men stood in the cold and said almost nothing. You might expect this to look like a mob. You might expect noise, anger, the kind of energy that comes from large men moving in numbers. What it actually looked like was a briefing. Bishop stood at the front, near the shop doors. No microphone, no elevation. He simply stood and spoke, and the men around him went still the way men go still when the person talking has earned every square inch of the silence he's standing in. The warehouse on Road 7 is 6,000 square feet, corrugated metal, 1 road entry. Scout has confirmed children inside. North wall. Transfer was scheduled for 11 o'clock. He paused. It is now 9:15. We have 45 minutes before Boyd's contact arrives, and ISP District 22 is 40 minutes out. Another pause. We are not going in loud. We are going in right. Stitch at the front, Scout on the east approach, Courier stays on the phone with Vasquez until she's on scene. The rest of us hold the perimeter. Nobody moves until the children are located. Then nobody leaves until Vasquez gets here." He looked around once. "We clear?" 211 hands. Not a single one stayed down. Not a moment's hesitation. Not a single voice asking about risk or liability or what happened if something went sideways. 211 men voting without words to hold a perimeter around a warehouse in the dark on a Friday night for children they had never met. Because that is what Brotherhood means, when it is real. They arrived at Road 7 at 10:11 p.m. The formation moved in disciplined rows down the county road, engines low, headlights cutting the dark. Past the grain elevator, a massive shadow against the sky, smelling of old corn and iron. Past Donald Kirsch's property on the left, the farmhouse dark at this hour, the old man inside who had seen van traffic here for 8 months and told himself it was a logistics operation and filed no report. The warehouse sat back from the road 40 yards, a squat metal structure with no windows on the north face. One exterior light over the south entrance, 2 figures near the door who, when 200 motorcycles materialized from the darkness of a county road at 10 miles per hour, went very still. Scout had the east approach. He moved fast and low along the fence line, the way Army intelligence moves, not dramatically, but efficiently, covering ground in the dark without announcing it. Gage went straight to the north wall. He had been thinking about the note since 3 a.m. the previous morning. About the word please used twice. About the child who had walked through a 31-degree night to deliver 34 words to people she had never met. He thought about the knock. Scout had said intermittent sounds, north wall. 3 beats. He pressed his ear flat against the corrugated metal. Cold. The smell of old machine oil and something beneath it. The particular closed smell of a space that hasn't been ventilated. He waited. 3 beats. He knocked back twice. Slow. Deliberate. 4 seconds of silence. 3 beats again. Same rhythm. Same spacing. Not random. This was a signal that had been practiced. He looked back at Stitch, who was already moving. The interior lock was a padlock on a hasp. Industrial, not cheap. It took Scout 40 seconds to address it with the bolt cutters he'd had on his bike since Thursday afternoon, because Scout had looked at the surveillance data he'd gathered and calculated that a padlock was the most likely exterior constraint for a staging location that needed to be quickly accessible and quickly secured. He had been right. The north section of the warehouse was separated from the main floor by a plywood partition. The partition had a door. The door was locked from the outside with a simple keyed deadbolt. Gage kicked it. 3 children. A support post in the center of the space, zip ties around their wrists behind them. A concrete floor. A single battery lantern in the corner, the kind you buy at a hardware store. It's light, yellowish, and thin. He saw the other 2 first, a boy, maybe 15, and a girl a little younger, both conscious, both staring. Then he saw her. The gray sweatshirt was the first thing, faded to the color of dishwater, the cracked iron-on of a horse on the front. 81 pounds, 5'1". Green eyes that were older than 13. The specific age that 9 months of surviving adds to a face, where the eyes have stopped being surprised by anything and are only measuring what comes next. She looked at him for a long moment, at the gray beard, at the patch, at the hands. Then she said, quietly, "You came. I didn't know if you'd come." 8 words. The exhale of a child who had held her breath for 43 hours, and finally let it go. Gage did not say anything yet. He took his cut off his shoulders, the leather vest, heavy and worn, with the sergeant-at-arms patch on the front. And he wrapped it around her. It covered her from her shoulders to her knees. He did not ask if she wanted it. He just did it. Then he said, "We read it, every word. We're here." He stayed at her level, did not stand over her. One hand on the floor beside her, palm up, offering, not demanding, waiting for her to set the pace. Stitch was already behind him, moving to the boy first, checking pulse, responsiveness, circulation in the wrists. His voice was level and unhurried. "I'm Paul. I'm a nurse. I'm going to check your hands first, okay? Tell me if anything hurts." The boy nodded. Lily spoke in 3 stages. Not because she was coached to, but because that is how the truth comes out after it has been held back for a very long time. In layers, each one requiring the safety of the previous one before it can surface. The first layer came fast. "My name is Lily Crawford. I've been at Boyd's facility on Valley Road for 9 months. There are 8 of us." Gage wrote it on his forearm with the pen he kept in his jacket pocket. Old habit. The second layer took a few more minutes. "He controls the food. He locks us in the East Wing. The state knows. He told us the state knows and approves. He showed us the paperwork once. I wrote to them. They didn't come." He kept writing. Crawford, Valley Road, East Wing, food restriction. Paperwork shown as compliance. Then the third layer. Her voice did not change volume when she said it. That was the thing that stayed with Gage afterward. She delivered the most important piece of information as calmly as she had delivered her name. Because she had been carrying it for 8 days and had rehearsed the moment of giving it to someone too many times to be dramatic about it now. "He has a ledger. In his office, locked cabinet. It has initials and money amounts and a column that says placed. There's a boy named Tyler who left 13 months ago, and nobody can find him." A pause. "I think the ledger knows where he went." She reached inside the gray sweatshirt against her skin. She produced a folded piece of paper, torn, creased, soft from 8 days of body heat. She held it out to Gage before anyone else could take it. "I wrote down what I heard him say. 8 days ago, through the vent. Those are his words, not mine. I wrote them down right after, so you would know they're accurate." Gage took it. He did not unfold it yet. He looked at her. "You walked 1.5 miles in the dark to tell us. You knocked on a wall so we'd find you. You did every single thing right, Lily." He stopped. Let the sentence settle. "The rest of this, that's ours to carry now." He stood. He offered his hand. Not to lead her, just to walk beside her. She took it. Outside, ISP investigator Rosa Vasquez arrived at 10:51 p.m., 10 minutes before Boyd's contact was expected. She had driven from LaPorte in 38 minutes on a call from Courier that she would later describe, in her official report, as the most organized and evidence-ready tip she had received in 14 years of trafficking investigations. She had 4 officers with her. She did not need them for crowd control. 211 bikers were standing in the cold in quiet formation at the perimeter, exactly where they had been told to stand. A few of them were on their phones. Most were just present, silent, watchful, exactly where they needed to be. Vasquez walked past them to the north entrance, where Gage was standing with Lily. She looked at Lily first, then at Gage. "The children are secure?" "3 here," Gage said. "5 more at the Valley Road facility. You need both locations tonight." She nodded. She was already on the radio. It was Ledger who gave investigators the first piece of what they would later call the financial architecture of Boyd's operation. He had been working since 7 a.m. Thursday with county property records, state licensing documentation, and corporate filings. 19 years of forensic accounting applied to 31 months of systematic fraud. He laid it out for Vasquez's colleague, ISP investigator Dale Morrow, on the hood of a truck in the Road 7 parking lot at 11:15 p.m., while Morrow's pen moved steadily across a legal pad. The Valley Road Group home was receiving $2,900 per child per month from Indiana IDCS, 8 children, $23,200 monthly, $278,400 annually. Boyd's reported operating cost was $19,000 per month. Actual estimated operating cost, based on utility filings and payroll records, approximately $6,200. The difference, roughly $12,800 per month, was leaving the legitimate books in ways that would take a full forensic audit to trace completely. The warehouse on Road 7 had been purchased 19 months ago for $61,000 through an LLC registered in the maiden name of Boyd's wife, who had not been aware of the account it was purchased from. The private ledger, which would be recovered from Boyd's locked filing cabinet at 12:34 a.m. Saturday morning, when Millhaven County Sheriff's deputies executed the search warrant, had 7 entries. Initials, dates, dollar amounts ranging from $8,500 to $13,750. A column reading placed. Total criminal revenue, conservatively estimated, between $73,000 and $98,000 over 31 months. Morrow stopped writing for a moment. 7, he said. 7 confirmed, Ledger said. There may be more. The ledger uses initials only. What he did not say, what he didn't need to say, because Morrow was already thinking it, was that 7 entries with the word placed meant 7 children who had left Boyd's facility and not arrived at the locations his paperwork claimed. 7 families who had been told transferred to alternative placement and given a Kentucky address, a Missouri address, a facility name in Ohio that, when investigators called the next morning, had no record of receiving any of them. 7 children. One of them was Tyler James Norris, 14 years old at placement, now 15 and missing for 13 months. His grandmother, Helen Norris, had called Carol Ann Phelps's office every 2 weeks for 8 months. The inquiry was still listed as under review. The ledger had an entry dated 13 months ago. Initials TN. Amount $11,200. Final column, placed. Morrow set his pen down. "We need a federal wire on this tonight," he said. Raymond Dale Boyd was arrested at 12:47 a.m. Saturday morning. He was at home, not at the warehouse, not in flight, not doing anything that looked like a man who knew what the next 3 hours would bring. He was in his kitchen, in reading glasses and a gray fleece pullover, heating something on the stove. A pan on the burner. The television murmuring in the next room. The same hands that had padlocked kitchen cabinets and controlled when 8 children were allowed to eat were holding a spatula when deputies came through the front door. He looked up with the expression of a man interrupted during a normal evening, confused, mildly annoyed, already composing the response he would give to whoever needed calming down. He did not get to give that response. Deputies read him his rights in the kitchen doorway, his face against the counter, wrists behind him. He was still wearing the reading glasses. Outside, 2 sheriff's vehicles were parked at the curb. No sirens, no drama. The neighbors on either side slept through it. 3 days later, when he made his first appearance before Judge Loretta Haynes in Mill Haven County Court, the charges were read aloud. Felony abuse of minors. 5 counts. 1 per year of operation, based on documented patterns of food deprivation and physical abuse. Child endangerment. 8 counts. 1 per current resident. Human trafficking. 7 counts. 1 per ledger entry, with federal enhancement pending the FBI's involvement, which was confirmed before the sun came up that Saturday. Wire fraud. 11 counts, related to the false operating cost filings submitted to Indiana IDCS over 31 months. Criminal conspiracy charges. 2 counts, covering Boyd's communication with the contact identified as RH in the text thread that had gone dark, as Boyd had planned, on Thursday night. Investigators had the thread before it went dark. Courier had given Vasquez the case for why to prioritize it on Thursday morning, when it still mattered. Boyd's bail was set at $1.2 million. The man who had told 8 children that the system approved of what was happening to them, who had used the appearance of compliance as the walls of a cage, looked at the table when the judge read the amounts. He did not look up. Carol Ann Phelps was suspended from her position at Mill Haven County DSS on Saturday afternoon, pending investigation. She had closed 4 formal complaints against Boyd's facility without a site visit. She had received $1,500 per child routed to the facility, paid quarterly through a consultation LLC registered in her husband's name, which Ledger had identified in the financial records by Sunday morning. She had been the reason Lily's hotline call went nowhere. The reason Tyler's grandmother's inquiry had been sitting in an inbox for 8 months. Detective Gary Weston was placed on administrative leave by Mill Haven PD on the same day. 19 months of $1,200 monthly cash payments, described as Neighborhood Watch Consulting, documented in Boyd's private records, had bought him 2 redirected investigations and 1 background check run on a foster family at Boyd's request. His credit card debt and second mortgage were not, it turned out, a problem the department had known about. They were, however, a problem the FBI found interesting. The system had not just failed. It had been maintained, methodically over 31 months, by people who understood exactly what they were protecting. Renata Sims had worked at the Valley Road facility for 4 months, left after she couldn't continue, and had not filed a formal complaint because she needed the reference. She had been carrying specific observations about the East Wing locking mechanism and the food schedule for 16 months. She called ISP District 22 on Saturday morning after seeing a news report. She was interviewed for 3 hours. Her account of the East Wing, that the rooms locked from the outside only, that she had once found a child inside who had been there 19 hours, that she had asked Boyd about it and he had told her it was a state-approved de-escalation protocol, corroborated 3 separate elements of Lily's testimony. The prosecutor later said that Renata Sims's interview was the moment the case became airtight. Renata's hands shook the entire time she was interviewed. Her voice broke on the word 19, as in 19 hours. She couldn't meet the investigator's eyes when she said, "I knew something was wrong. I just kept telling myself someone with more authority had already seen it. I told myself the state had approved it." A long pause. He told everyone the state had approved it. That was the thing. He said it so many times it started to feel true. Barbara Engel, the church volunteer who had visited Boyd's facility monthly and noticed Lily's bruise in February and accepted Boyd's explanation, Barbara Engel had not slept well in 3 weeks. She called her pastor on Saturday afternoon. She called ISP District 22 on Sunday morning. She said, "I saw the bruise. I saw how thin she was. I told myself I didn't have enough information to make an accusation." She stopped. "But I wasn't looking for information. I was looking for a reason not to have to act. And I found one because Boyd gave me one. He's very good at that." Her statement would be included in the prosecution's narrative of institutional failure. Not to prosecute Barbara, but to illustrate the mechanics of how Boyd had survived for 31 months. Not through invisibility, but through giving everyone who might have stopped him a comfortable exit. The torn page from the back of Charlotte's Web, Lily's handwritten record of the overheard phone conversation carried against her skin inside the sweatshirt for 8 days, was logged as Exhibit C. At trial, which began 7 months after Boyd's arrest and lasted 3 days, the prosecutor read it aloud. Boyd's words in a child's careful handwriting. "The Crawford girl is one of them. She's been trouble. Better she goes first." The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Boyd was looking at the table when the verdict was read. The morning after the arrest, Millhaven was quiet in the way small towns go quiet when something large and long hidden has finally been brought into the light. Not peaceful exactly, but the particular stillness of a place recalibrating itself, trying to figure out what it believed about what it thought it knew. 8 children had been inside the Valley Road group home when ISP units arrived at 11:23 p.m. Friday. All 8 were removed. All 8 were medically evaluated before midnight. Stitch did not leave until every one of them had been seen. He worked alongside the county paramedics in the way ER nurses work alongside anyone, not competing, not deferring, just filling the gaps with the precision of someone who knows where the gaps are. He was the one who flagged that 3 of the children were showing early signs of malnutrition-related complications and needed hospital admission rather than outpatient evaluation. He was the one who told the admitting physician at Millhaven Regional, "Refeeding protocol. Don't rush the calories. Give the body time to remember how to accept them." The physician looked at him. "You a doctor?" Stitch shook his head. 11 years ER? You do the math." All 3 children were admitted. All 3 were stable by morning. Lily was one of them. Her weight, 81 pounds at 5'1", put her BM1 at 15.3, which the attending physician categorized as severely malnourished. The crooked left ring finger was X-rayed and confirmed as a healed fracture with structural misalignment at the 2nd knuckle, consistent with a break that had occurred approximately 7 months prior and had never been set. The physician's notes read, "Patient appears calm and oriented. Cooperative with examination. Demonstrates unusual situational awareness for age. Will require nutritional rehabilitation, orthopedic consult for finger, and psychological evaluation. Prognosis, good with appropriate care. Unusual situational awareness for age." The doctor meant it as a clinical observation. He didn't know it was the most precise description of what 9 months of surviving requires from a 13-year-old. On Saturday morning, while Boyd was being processed and Phelps was being suspended, and Gary Weston was staring at a wall in his kitchen, trying to understand how the arithmetic of bad decisions had arrived at this particular morning. Gage was sitting in a hospital corridor on a plastic chair outside Lily's room, drinking coffee from a paper cup that had gone cold an hour ago. He had been there since 2 a.m. Emma called at 8 o'clock. His daughter, 28 years old, who knew nothing about Friday night, yet except what she'd seen on the news crawl. "Dad," she said, "is that Millhaven story connected to you?" "Yeah." A pause. "Is the girl okay?" "She will be." He heard Emma breathe. Then, "Those 14 months. You never stopped thinking about them, did you?" It wasn't a question. "No," Gage said. "I didn't." "Good," Emma said. "Don't." He held the phone for a moment after she hung up. The corridor smelled like antiseptic and the particular industrial warmth of hospital heating systems. Outside the window at the end of the hall, Indiana was doing what Indiana does in early March. Gray sky, bare trees, the faint suggestion of something eventually coming that hadn't arrived yet. He went back to the plastic chair. The question of where Lily went next was answered in the way the best answers to hard questions get answered. Not by a system, but by people inside the system who chose to do their jobs as if they meant them. A family advocate named Patricia Osei at Indiana IDCS, assigned to Lily's case as part of the emergency review triggered by the arrests, had been in child welfare for 19 years. She was the kind of person who answered her own phone. She called the hospital at 9 a.m. Saturday, introduced herself to the charge nurse, and asked to be notified the moment Lily was cleared for a non-medical conversation. She arrived at 11:30 a.m. with a folder, a notepad, and no clipboard. She sat in the chair beside Lily's bed, not across the room, not standing. And she said, "My name is Patricia. I work for the state. I know that sentence has not meant good things for you. I need you to tell me what you need, and I'm going to do my best to make sure it actually happens this time." Lily looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "I need to know my mother is okay." Patricia Osei had the hospital on the phone within the hour. Lily's mother, Margaret Crawford, 41, 18 months into a rehabilitation program following her medical episode, now stable and actively working toward independent living, had not stopped trying to reach Lily. Her letters had been returned unopened. Her calls to the facility had been screened. She had filed an inquiry with the county 4 months ago that had been routed and closed by Carol Ann Phelps. She was told her daughter was on the phone at 1:17 p.m. Saturday afternoon. The conversation lasted 47 minutes. A nurse who happened to be in the corridor said afterward that she hadn't meant to listen, but that she had stood outside the room for a full 2 minutes because she couldn't make herself walk away from the sound of it. Ledger spent the better part of the weekend working with ISP financial investigators, walking them through the architecture of the fraud, the LLC structure, the wire transfers, the inflated operating costs, the consulting fees to Phelps's husband's sole proprietorship. He had organized everything into a summary document that investigator Morrow later described in his deposition as the clearest financial overview he had received in 22 years of investigative work. "You should have stayed in the IRS," Morrow told him. Ledger shrugged. "The IRS doesn't feed you nearly as well." Scout handled something that didn't make any report, and wouldn't appear in any official record, because it didn't need to. The other children from the Valley Road facility, 6 of them, ranging in age from 11 to 16, placed in emergency foster situations over the weekend, needed someone to explain to them, in plain language, what had happened and what was going to happen next. Not a social worker with a protocol, just someone who sat down with them and told them the truth. Scout did this, one child at a time, in whatever space was available, a hospital waiting room, a corner of a county DSS office, a picnic table outside when the 11-year-old said he needed air. He was 31 years old and looked like what he was. A man with a military background and a motorcycle and a face that had been outside in all weather. The 11-year-old looked at him for a long time and then said, "Are you going to be here tomorrow?" Scout said, "I'll be here as long as you need." He was there for 4 days. Helen Norris, Tyler's grandmother, 74 years old, who had called Carol Ann Phelps's office every 2 weeks for 8 months and been told each time that the inquiry was under review, received a call from a federal investigator on Sunday afternoon. The call lasted 20 minutes. The investigator told her what they knew. He told her what they didn't know yet. He told her that Tyler's case was now part of a federal trafficking investigation with active resources, and that under review was no longer an answer she would ever have to accept again. She was quiet for a long moment after he finished. Then she said, "He liked to draw? Did anyone find any drawings?" The investigator said he didn't know. He said he would find out. He called her back on Tuesday. There were no drawings at the Valley Road facility. Boyd had not kept personal items. But Helen Norris's name was now in the case file in the way it needed to be, attached to a human being and not just an inquiry number, and the federal investigation that would spend the next 16 months dismantling the network that had received Tyler James Norris was moving, finally, with the force of something that had been stopped too long. 6 weeks after the arrests, Raymond Boyd was transferred to pre-trial detention at the Indiana State Correctional Facility in Michigan City. He entered a not guilty plea that no one who had read the ledger, the wire transfers, the text thread, or Lily Crawford's torn page from the back of Charlotte's Web took particularly seriously. Carol Ann Phelps negotiated a plea arrangement, cooperation with federal investigators in exchange for reduced state charges, and spent 17 months providing testimony that helped build the case against the trafficking network Boyd had been servicing. She lost her pension. She lost her house to civil forfeiture related to the consulting fees. Gary Weston was charged with obstruction of justice and bribery. He accepted a plea. 2 years served, 5 years probation, permanent revocation of his law enforcement certification. He coached his son's hockey team for the last time, the February before his sentencing. His son was 11. At trial, which opened in October, the prosecution built its case across 3 days with the methodical patience of investigators who had had 7 months and a complete financial record to prepare. Medical testimony, financial records, the text thread. Renata Sims on the witness stand for 2 hours, steady and precise, her hands finally still. Barbara Engel, who had asked to testify and was permitted to, describing what she had seen and what she had chosen to accept instead of seeing. Her voice breaking once on the word bruise and not breaking again. And the torn page from Charlotte's Web, read aloud in a courtroom by Assistant Prosecutor Dana Whitfield, her voice even and clear, Boyd's words in a child's careful handwriting filling the room. Better she goes first. The jury was out for less than 2 hours. Boyd received 43 years. Federal trafficking charges would be adjudicated separately. The U.S. Attorney's Office indicated additional sentencing was expected. Parole eligibility? Not before year 18. He was looking at the table when the verdict was read. He was looking at the table when the sentence was handed down. By that point, no one in the courtroom was looking at him at all. They were looking at Lily. She was seated in the gallery with Patricia Osei on one side and her mother on the other. Margaret Crawford, who had been discharged from her rehabilitation program in August and was 3 months into a supported living arrangement in Garrett County. Margaret was 41 years old and looked, at this moment, like someone who had climbed a very long way back from a very dark place and arrived just in time. Lily was not crying. Her expression was the same one she wore when Gage had first cut her loose in that warehouse. The composed, measuring gaze of someone who has already processed the worst of it and is now simply confirming that what was promised has actually been delivered. Then she turned and found Gage in the gallery, 6 rows back. She gave him a single nod. He gave her one back. That was the whole exchange. It was enough. 1 year and 4 months after a 13-year-old girl walked 1.33 miles through a 31-degree Indiana night and slipped 34 words under a door, Lily Crawford sat in the front row of her 8th grade classroom in Garrett County and raised her hand. The question was about the American judicial system. The teacher had asked the class whether they thought the system worked. Lily thought about it for a moment. Then she said, "It depends on who's making it work." The teacher wrote that on the board. By the time Boyd's federal sentencing concluded, Lily had gained 22 pounds. The orthopedic consult for her left ring finger had resulted in a corrective procedure. A short surgery, pins and targeted physical therapy, 8 weeks of exercises she did every morning without complaint. The finger would never be entirely straight, but she could close her hand now, which she hadn't been able to do for 7 months, and there was something in the way she flexed it sometimes, not showing off, just checking. That suggested she had not taken the small mechanical miracle of a working hand for granted. She had been enrolled in a regular school since September. She had made honor roll in the first semester. She had also, quietly, and without announcing it to anyone, started a small journal. Not the dangerous kind, not dates and times and evidence, the kind she'd kept because she might someday need to prove what happened. This one was different. This one had opinions in it, observations. The beginning, she told Patricia Osei, of something she hadn't decided the shape of yet. Patricia told her that was called writing. Lily said she knew. Her father had been the one who taught her. The Indiana Department of Child Services launched a statewide audit of group home facilities in April, 2 months after Boyd's state-level conviction. The audit examined 47 licensed facilities, reviewed complaint histories against placement approval records, and specifically flagged cases where the same DSS supervisor had both placed children and reviewed subsequent complaints. The structural conflict of interest that had made Lily's hotline call go nowhere. New independent oversight protocols were implemented by July. Complaint reviews for facilities could no longer be handled by the same department that had made the placement decision. It was not a monument. It was a policy change in a bureaucratic document that most people would never read. But somewhere in Indiana, there is now a child who will call a hotline and have their call reviewed by someone who has no reason to make it disappear. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. The chapter held a gathering in August. Not a formal event, just bikes in the parking lot on Route 9, a grill going in the back, the particular ease of people who have done something hard together and can now simply be in the same place without needing to explain it. Lily came with her mother. She wore a yellow t-shirt. She looked, for the first time in a long time, like the age she actually was. Stitch brought a birthday cake. Her birthday had been in May, when things were still in the middle of settling, and someone had suggested they owed her a proper celebration. The cake was chocolate. There were candles. When she blew them out, she did not make a wish. Or if she did, she kept it. Ledger taught her to play chess at a picnic table while the afternoon went long. She beat him in their third game. He accused her of sandbagging the first two. Scout showed her how to read a topographic map. She was methodical and precise, and asked questions that made him look up twice, the way a teacher looks up when a student demonstrates understanding instead of just attention. And Gage sat nearby, in a folding chair, drinking coffee that had actually stayed warm this time. Emma had come down from Indianapolis. She sat beside her father and watched Lily at the chess table. This small girl in a yellow shirt who had walked through the dark to find people who looked like trouble and turned out to be the only ones who stopped. "She reminds me of you," Emma said. Gage looked at her. "She's nothing like me." "She's exactly like you," Emma said. "She doesn't wait for permission to do the necessary thing." He didn't answer that, but he didn't argue either. This story is not, at its core, about motorcycles or leather vests or the particular sound that two 1-1 engines make when they cut off in unison in a county road parking lot at 10 p.m. on a Friday night. Though that sound is, by all accounts, worth hearing. This story is about the 4 moments before that sound, the 4 times that a child tried to tell the right people that something was wrong, and the right people found reasons not to act. A state inspector who wrote down a concern and then accepted the counter-narrative because it was faster. A hotline operator who routed a call correctly, and a supervisor who closed it because her interests were elsewhere. A letter that never arrived because the facility that was hurting the child also controlled her mail. A church volunteer who saw a bruise and a child who was losing weight and chose the explanation that required nothing of her. These are not extraordinary failures. They are ordinary ones. They happen in child welfare systems across every state, every year, quietly and without drama, because the systems are large, and the children inside them are small, and the people who are supposed to notice are overworked or conflicted, or simply looking for a reason to believe that someone else has already handled it. Boyd survived for 31 months, not because he was invisible. He survived because he gave everyone who might have stopped him a comfortable exit. The inspector had her protocol. Phelps had her paperwork. Weston had his cash and his self-told story about the one time he visited, and everything looked fine. Barbara Engel had a half-dozen gentle euphemisms about children from difficult backgrounds, and 7 children had already been moved through a warehouse on Road 7, before Lily Crawford sat up in the dark at 2 in the morning and decided to use the last option she had. The National Child Abuse Hotline is 1-800-422-4453. It operates every hour of every day. The call is confidential, and the operators are trained for exactly this. If you know a child in the foster system, any child, anywhere, be their outside voice. Visit, write letters, keep a record of when you visited and what you observed. If something looks wrong, report it. If the report is closed without action, report again. This time to your state attorney general's office, or to a federal tip line, or to a journalist who covers child welfare. Do not accept under review as a final answer. That phrase has a different meaning when you are a child, and the person reviewing is the person who placed you there. You do not need 211 motorcycles to change a story. You need to be the person who does not look for a comfortable exit. You need to be the person who does not assume someone else has already handled it. You need to be, as James Crawford told his daughter once in a story she never forgot, the kind of person who stops. The gray sweatshirt, the one with the cracked iron-on of a horse, faded to the color of dishwater, the only thing Lily had been allowed to keep from her former life, was washed and folded and put in a drawer in September. She still has it. She does not wear it anymore. She doesn't need to. But she has not thrown it away either. Because some things are worth keeping, not because they're comfortable, but because they're true. Because they're a record of what you carried and how far you carried it, and the particular night when someone finally took the weight. Gage's cut had covered her from her shoulders to her knees in a warehouse in the dark. She had worn it all the way to the ambulance. She had given it back at the hospital door, folded carefully, the way she folded everything. And he had taken it and put it back on his shoulders without ceremony. Just a man picking up what was his after it had done what it needed to do. That's the whole story. Except it's not, really. Because Lily is 14 now. She has opinions about the judicial system, and a journal that doesn't have an ending yet, and a mother who calls every Tuesday, and a finger that can finally close all the way. She has, for the first time in a very long time, a future she is not just surviving toward. She is walking toward it. In the daylight. On purpose. At her own pace. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Valiant Bikers and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop your city in the comments below. And if you've ever been someone's outside voice, or if someone was yours, tell me about it. Those are the stories that remind us what we're actually capable of. More stories like this one are coming. Because the world is full of people who stop when everyone else keeps walking, and every single one of them deserves to be seen.